There we go. We're live on YouTube Q&A with Dima. The program is called Transformation, the Art of Reinvention in the Time of the Pandemic. This afternoon, I'm joined by an old friend, a wonderful American soprano living in Germany for many years, Nadine Secunde. So it's a great pleasure to welcome you here. You're speaking to us from Wiesbaden.
Yeah.
Which, of course, that's where we met in '82 when my wife, Susan Roberts, got the position there and we moved to Wiesbaden. Now, I know a lot about you from '82, but tell me what happened before. You were born and raised in Ohio, and tell me about your upbringing and was there any music in the family? How did you become a musician, singer, and so forth?
Yeah, it's funny with a lot of singers, I find that they skip a generation. There's very often grandparents that were musical, and I had two grandmas that were musical, but my dad was he fixed cars and my mom was a nurse, but somehow we all sang. The idea that one could make money at singing was totally new. Who did that? So when I went to college, I studied music education and piano, which, by the way, I can recommend for any singers because it so helps if you can actually, play your own music and don't have to depend on somebody else all the time. And when I went to Oberlin, one of the requirements was that you had to do an ensemble, which everybody hated. You had to sing in the choir, or you had to. One of the ways you could get out of that was to accompany. So I said, that's what I'll do. I'll play for a voice class. I can do that. And I went into the voice class to play for these, singers, vocal majors. They were the elite. And I listened to what was going on in the class, and I just thought, well, this could be fun. Why not, right? And so I ended up singing for Mr. Hatton, who was the voice class person, and he said, yeah, well, we can take you on. And so to make a long story short, by the time I graduated, I had actually almost a triple major in piano, voice, and music education. It took me 5 years, but I had it. And as far as I was concerned, I was going to go back to Ohio and teach high school music. And then somebody told me about this teacher in Indiana who was supposed to be magical. So basically what happened was my roommate packed me up in her car and said, we're going to Indiana because we're going to study voice. And the rest just kind of happened. We ended up staying there for a year because you can get state fees if you live in the state of Indiana. You don't have to pay full fees. You can just pay in-state fees, which is thousands of dollars cheaper. So that's what we did. I worked in a restaurant and a library for a year. And at the end of the year, I went and sang for Margaret Harshaw. And that's kind of how things happened. But it was like, I don't know how it is for most American singers, but for me, there was never the question of actually being an opera singer. I was going to be a teacher who sings, or I was going to go to New York and sing in a choir or something like that. But the idea of going to Europe and actually making money at this didn't happen until I met somebody who knew how to do that, which was my teacher. She said, you got to go to Europe. I said, oh, that's a fine idea. Now tell me how to finance that, please. Yeah. And so she said, yeah, well, there's scholarships. You just have to, get yourself busy and apply for some. So that's what I did. Even today, when I talk to young singers about scholarships, there's a lot of them that don't even know that you can go to Europe for free if you get a certain scholarship from the States. And it doesn't even have to be a Fulbright. It can be a DAAD. It can be a Rotary scholarship. There's money available to go to Europe. You just have to dig around in the internet to find it. Back when I was there, we didn't even have an internet. We just had to write to everybody. But I did, and I ended up with the Fulbright, which actually is an academic scholarship. It's not a music scholarship, but you could study music. And in the Hochschule, in the conservatory that took me, which was in Stuttgart, they had a program which I thought was magical, where an agent actually came and listened to the singers. And he came and listened to me, and he sent me to a theater, and it was Wiesbaden. And it was, yeah, I know. When I tell people that story to my young singers today, they just go, it must have been so easy back then. I said, it really was easier. It really was easier than it is now.
I think also it must have been easier from the point, because my story is just the opposite of yours, because if I was not going to be one of the top soloists, I was going to be a failure because I was the son of
because of your family, of
so
course.
that just ruins, because the expectations are way
yeah, it's crazy. Yeah,
than the reality. But for you, what's wonderful that you, since your expectations were really very
was
modest,
zero. There were zero.
Yeah,
everything was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, everything was just like discovery. Oh, I can do this. Oh, so maybe I try this. But Fulbright, you must have been a really brilliant student, though. I mean,
you have to have a really good grade average to get a Fulbright. Yeah. But you also, and this is, I was just talking to my daughter about this because she's writing her doctorate now, and we talk a lot about writing proposals. And you can write a proposal that you think will get your message across, or you can write a proposal that you think they want to hear. And I think you have to be really quite shameless about that. I wanted to go to Germany, so I wrote this entire document about how you had to speak German and understand the German culture to sing Wagner, which is what I wanted to do. I mean, I believed all that.
Exactly.
That kind of wasn't the main reason I wanted to go to Germany, but it sounded really good. Consider your audience when you write such a proposal, what they would want to hear.
That's a great advice to the young ones, because one doesn't so many people or fans of famous singers. Your illustrious colleague, for instance, Renee Fleming. First time we met her at a festival, and Susan was there, and of course, Susan sang after Wiesbaden in Frankfurt for 3 years. And Renee says, "Oh, I know you. I heard you a number of times." I said, "No, how would you?" So that because I was on a scholarship studying a year in Frankfurt. She studied with Arlene Auger. She had nothing to do with Frankfurt Opera, but she went to every performance, and she rolled off. Oh, you were in the Seraglio, you were in this and that. So you see, that's how you get into it. And very few people even know that. Recently passed away great Jesse Norman was in Gelsenkirchen. That I tried to find that on the map. That's certainly not the glamorous.
It's the Detroit of Wiesbaden, basically.
Yeah, Detroit used to be a great city. Gelsenkirchen was never a great city.
Oh, don't tell them about that. Don't tell them about their football team.
Wiesbaden was the city of millionaires before the war. I mean, Wiesbaden is very beautiful. Yeah,
it is. It is. A lot of people laugh and call it the Beverly Hills of Germany, and it kind of is. It's a kind of a snooty little town, but it is. It was never big on the cultural map. I mean, you do have to go to Frankfurt or, one of the bigger places to do that. I mean, we had a certain amount of culture going on, but
so easy. So we never moved to Frankfurt. Once Susan got a position in Frankfurt, we stayed in Wiesbaden. Was within half an hour. She was sometimes twice a day in Frankfurt Theater and came back.
Sure.
Even your next stop, Cologne, was not that far.
It was a commute. I used to drive home after performances, sure. And after that, the airport was a half an hour from our house.
That was the best time.
That's the great stuff.
20 minutes door to door.
Yep.
No traffic. Those days you can kiss goodbye. Now you have to be prepared for. I mean, now with COVID and everything, I mean, it's like a siege mentality. You have to camp out at the airport and wait for this and wait for that, and then maybe it'll go, maybe it won't. It's a different story. Tell me, was there also a period when many, because I know on the receiving end, that's how I met Susan, of course, but there were many wonderful American singers coming to Germany, to Europe in general. Were there any of your class in Oberlin or Indiana, any of the colleagues that we might know, studying with you at that time?
Well, if I told you their names, you probably wouldn't know them, but they were working singers.
They were working.
There was a whole class of people who ended up in maybe not Munich, but in Karlsruhe or
Right.
Stuttgart,
Right.
who, you wouldn't know them from recording or something, but they made a living at it. Great, I'd have to think about from Indiana. I mean, we did have people like Benita Valente. We had people like, in our class, Kevin Lang and Sally Wolf. I mean, people who did make careers. But the broad mass of them actually ended up in houses like Mannheim and sang for years and years. And I don't think there's too many studios in the States right now that can say, like, of my graduating class from Indiana, probably 80% of them went on to work in their chosen field of opera. Which is practically not findable today, unfortunately. Yeah, partly because the market has changed, and partly because people don't invest in the careers anymore that much. I mean, they try to stay home and do the career.
And also, I think the field has changed because now you have a lot of Europeans. East Europeans coming at that time. At that time, it was still before the wall came down, and you have a lot more, coming from Orient, from Korea.
Oh yeah, from Korea and China, even Japan. Yeah, that's true.
Now I meet when I hear Julia singing in Handorf and Dresden, I see a lot of Russians, Polish singers, whatever, and also from Korea and so forth. There weren't as many at that time. Susan is reminding me of a name maybe that escaped you, Cheryl Studer. Was she?
Oh gosh, yes, she was an Oberlin girl. Yeah. Yeah, of course. She was a huge star, of course, back then. Yeah.
We saw.
Yeah, and
once you came to Wiesbaden, that was a whole new. How did you adjust? Because it is a cultural shock in a good way, but it is.
Well, I think I had it a little bit easier in the fact that I'd already been a year in Germany and been through this Fulbright program, and I already spoke the language to some extent, and had kind of figured out that, yes, you have to, clean your steps in front of your apartment. And yes, the door handles are different and the toilets are different. And, you better not cross on a green light, like you do in New York. There were just a lot of things that I was really used to about Germany and came to appreciate about Germany. So the adjustment, I think, for me was not as horrible. The first year when I was down in the Goethe Institute in Rosenheim, that was a major adjustment. I mean, coming directly from the States to Rosenheim, which is like, teeny little Bavarian city, and going into this Goethe program, which throws you in with people and you're not allowed to speak your native language with them. You get a roommate who's Italian and you better speak German with them. So that was intense. That was an intense 3 months. But that was the worst of it. After that, things got a little bit easier. And there was a major clique of American singers at Wiesbaden that time. We had I don't even know if this kind of situation exists in Germany anymore today. It was an ensemble that played together, that, really socialized together, that was a group of friends. I mean, I know that there are ensembles in Germany, but the fact that we were almost all Americans made a huge difference. It was like a club, Similar situation in Cologne, not quite as intense, but in Wiesbaden, we were practically all in our first year contracts. We were all new. We were all holding each other's hands and playing, Scrabble together and stuff. And it was, a lot of those friendships lasted forever, that it was, one of those really intense times that you just enjoy. In that ensemble system, I would wish every young singer to have a couple of years of that, because it's the difference between thinking singing is this thing you do only on weekends and under enormous amounts of preparation, and seeing singing as a job. If you're in an ensemble and something gets canceled, you go down and sing. I mean, they say, we're putting on Bordered Bride tonight, so put on your brakes and come on down. And you know, it could be 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and that stuff happens in an ensemble situation. And it gives you this security for life about being flexible and not thinking every night is a premiere. Because there's some nights that just, you know, are not going to go the way you want them to go. And because we're in Wiesbaden, it probably won't mean the end of my career. So, and that is such a wonderful experience. I would, you know, really recommend it for anybody who has a chance of going into an ensemble system, because it just is it's a basis for your whole career then. You never really have the kind of nerves, I think, that people have that don't do that, because you understand it's a job. It's a great career, but it's also a job. You do it, you know, when you have to do it, you do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think I remember also those years in Wiesbaden, which of course combined, in Susan's case, 2 years in Wiesbaden and then 3 years in Frankfurt, but we stayed in Wiesbaden and we continued, and the friendship with you goes back there. But it was also at that time, we used to even go, there were a lot of Americans in town because of the American Air Base. We used
Yeah,
to
also,
and
sure.
show sometimes in that air base, being American.
Yeah, they used to let you in there. Now they don't anymore, of course.
I know,
but they used to in the good old days. Yeah. No, it was just a much different time, much less pressure. I'm sure we were all in our own ways ambitious, but we were all very happy to be where we were right then. It was great to be young, and we thought we were talented, and, you know, we were having a great time, and there were other things that were important, you know, meeting people in the orchestra and stuff like that. It was fun. It was fun to be a singer. And I'm not sure young singers always are finding that these days.
It seems to us anyway, to the old folks, to the older folks, that it's so easy to fall into, oh, in our times and this and that. But there are some objective reasons why to say, you know, the field was more
different.
Open. Yeah, it was different, and it
was different.
more open. It didn't seem so, you know, so prohibited.
Well, you weren't, you know, okay, there were pirate recordings, but you weren't, you know, nobody was recording every single, you know, fart that you made on stage like they do now. You know, you didn't do a bad performance and see it next day on YouTube, because nobody had that kind of technology back then. You know, there was much less pressure. Yeah. And unless you were really being recorded, which was extremely unusual because it was a big deal and very illegal and everything like that, you just didn't have this danger of always showing up somewhere where you didn't want to show up because you made a mess, you know. It was, I don't think we took the whole thing quite so seriously as people do now, because they know, you know.
In a good way. It was less pressure. The microphone was not always just hanging in front of you.
No, hardly ever.
Picking up. Or now, you know, you go to any place, and all they do, it seems like they forget to experience wherever they are. They're just taking pictures or little videos. Everybody, it's like nobody, you know, when there is political or a cultural event, everybody's with the phone. Just remember it with your eyes, you know, just soak it in.
Yeah, be in the moment.
Be in the moment, exactly. It's not going to be in the picture anyway. You know, it's not what it is. I mean, I like to take pictures when I go on my walks in various places, and, you know, whatever my friends on Facebook or wherever, they like to see my pictures. That's fine. But I take a walk, and then I might take a picture of a lovely Christmas market now, when all Christmas markets were canceled in Tallinn. They had it. So why shouldn't I take a picture? Of course. But it wasn't like, you know, you come out of it's like paparazzi. Everybody became paparazzi these days. You know?
Yes. Yeah.
In a way. Let's move on to something that became very important for you, because one of your sort of the staple of your repertoire, of course, was even before you came to Germany, was the interest in Wagner. And then you ended up singing a lot of Wagner. So let's
God
stick
knows.
with Wagner and tell us about Bayreuth. How did
Well, to quote John Tomlinson, Sir John now, it's like being in hell. No, it's Bayreuth is it's a melting pot. It's like being in a blacksmith shop and getting beat on every day, basically, especially if you're there with people like Kupfer and Barenboim. But you know, it's incredibly intense. I find myself talking about it like people who went through the Second World War talk about the Second World War. You know, it's just like, oh, well, we just sweated every day and we were, you know, wearing these furs and we rehearsed 9 hours a day and Harry would keep screaming at us. And it was, but I mean, like most things that are incredibly educational, they hurt a little while they're happening. And this hurt, you know, it hurt a lot. The first summer was actually quite namby-pamby because that was the summer that Werner Herzog was doing the Lohengrin.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, which was beautiful.
That was your first role there.
That was the first role. Yeah, and he did this beautiful fairy tale thing, and his main question a lot of times during the rehearsals were things like, "Oh, that looks like what do you usually do there?" So we would do that, you know, and he was happy, and he and his crew had rented a magical ruin of a castle outside of Bayreuth, and they had star-studded parties with lots of, you know, alcohol. It was just magical to even be close to a personality like that. I mean, he would sit down and tell you about the time he was across the ice floe from a polar bear, and it was just like, it was, you just couldn't, you know, couldn't look away. And he was, I adore that man. I laughed so hard when I saw him in The Mandalorian. I just thought, oh my God, Werner, what are you doing there? It's just so funny to see him again.
Yeah.
And this was the summer, if you had to get used to Bayreuth, this was the way to do it, with somebody who was very low pressure and very kind. Peter Schneider, who was the world's kindest conductor. And that was fine until the end came and I got sick for the premiere, which was famous in its own way. But the second summer was the Barenboim Kupfer team, and that was completely different experience. I mean, those guys, whoa, you know, they put us through our paces. I think it ended up being one of the places that I learned the most about how to sing and what I was actually capable of doing on stage. And I was very lucky because I was relatively young when that happened. I was relatively young and to be in Bayreuth at all. And it changed the way that I looked at singing forever. Unfortunately, it also set an incredibly high standard of what opera can be, and didn't get really close to that very often again. There is a way to make opera a living, breathing thing that jumps off the stage and grabs you by the throat. And he could always do that, even if you didn't like a lot of what was going on. But yeah, and you get a little spoiled. I think it's probably like what you must have experienced working with a great conductor when you were like 12 or whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
And also, yes, you know, I played, my first trip was to Prague at 12, exactly at 12. And Rudolfinum for me is always
That's it.
one of the most
standard.
beautiful. And then the first place I went when I immigrated was Vienna Musikverein. And I was standing in the back. I told Pinkas Zuckerman and Jamie Laredo, whose concert it was.
Yeah.
And all I could afford was standing in the back of the 200 shillings. Yeah, I mean, I was a poor emigre. I was in Vienna for 8 days before being shipped down to Rome for 3 months of, you know, and I heard in that Golden Hall, it was just something extraordinary.
Yeah.
And little did I know that just 2 years later, I'll be on stage winning the Chrysler competition in that very hall. You know, but at that point, it just seemed so. It's like a holy grail. And Pinky, he was just incredibly wonderful. And I thought, gee, I came from a rather prominent violin country. You know, I've heard it my time. but is everybody like this? That was an extraordinary performance. As long as I live, I will never forget it, because it's the first thing you have and all that. So Bayreuth must be like this.
Well, yeah.
I remember Bayreuth. Also, the acoustics are so perfect for Wagner's operas. I mean, singers are just never covered. Just never.
Yeah, no, never. Yeah. And working with a team like that sets you up for life with extremely high standards. And even in houses and after Bayreuth, because you get your stamp of Bayreuth on you, and pretty much you start working in bigger places after that. And even in the really wonderful places that I did work with, that kind of, just energy and commitment to a production, it just doesn't happen that often. But that's okay, it's all right.
Susan used to call that place Camp Wagner. in a way it was. It wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure.
It's some kind of a musical, artistic, religious cult. It is.
It's a cult, definitely. And of course, the ones who were singing the big roles were always very jealous of the ones who were singing the small roles, the Knappens and these and that, because they were having a great time. They were in the cantina, drinking afterwards and going on hikes and everything. And we were in our rooms going, oh, I think I have a sore throat. Oh my God, I'm getting, it's the Bayreuth, curse of Bayreuth, which is the climate, I might get sick. I can't possibly go out for a glass of wine because I might get sick, So yeah, those guys had the best time, actually.
Yeah, of course. Now, obviously, that was a place where you first also came across some of the biggest names among the conductors, and you worked with great colleagues and everything. What could you tell us a little bit about, your experiences, let's say, with big names like Barenboim, Scholti, and then later Telemann, which is of course now a big name in that particular repertoire. So what did you learn? What was the sort of revelatory, interesting, what you could bring home, what you could take home from them?
Even these huge personalities, and they are huge personalities that do opera.
Oh, yeah.
The conductors also. I mean, they don't just do opera, of course. All of these people that you mentioned do concerts and are the stars sometimes. But when they get in the pit, I think that I'm not alone in feeling this way. If they are beyond wonderful or beyond excellent, you don't feel like you're singing at all. It's like they're taking care of everything. You are so supported, helped, nurtured when you need to be. And there's a complete subjection of the personality, of this enormous personality, to the moment. And not everybody can do that. That's what makes, among other things, the three people that you just mentioned so special, because these are, huge egos, all three of them. I mean, yeah. But this is the moment that they are doing opera. I don't know how it is with concerts, because never did a concert with them. But at the moment that they do operas, they are at the, let's say, at the service of the singer and at the service of the piece. And it's very amazing to watch this happen. Especially somebody like, I love Christian Telemann. I've always loved him. And, to see him rant and rave during rehearsals and then say, oh, throw a coach off the bench and say, you don't know how to play this piece, and sit down and play Rosenkavalier without the music and things like that. You just go, oh, wow. And on the evening, he hears the first three notes of the trio in Rosenkavalier. What do I know? And hears, oh, she's not at her best tonight. And all of a sudden, he's just like, no, we'll just, come on, just let me do it. Let me do it. I'll help you sing this. And that's an opera conductor, and that is a unique gift. And I don't think all conductors can do that.
No.
And clearly it doesn't have anything to do with their opinion of themselves, because these guys all think they're God on earth, and so do I to some extent. But at the moment where they're there for you, they are unbelievably for you there, just complete subjection. It's wonderful.
Music takes over, and it's all about just making the best out of this piece, and we're there together. And so
Yeah.
if you need help, we'll help
And
you.
also having the ears to recognize when and if you need help, or if you're having a good evening. When I was first studying Arabella, I had the amazing good fortune to meet and work with the first Arabella, which was Romanian. I think she was Romanian, Viorica Orzoleac, who was the partner of Krauss for many years, and one of the Strauss sopranos. And she did the first Arabella. She was very old when I met her, like 92 or something. And she had sung many Arabellas with Strauss. And I asked her, what was, she said, well, I didn't even notice he was there most of the time. And if I was having a really good evening, he would let me hold out the high notes much longer than they were written. And I just laughed so hard. I just thought about doing that in a modern performance, and just have somebody down there. Yeah, go ahead. Hey, you're having a good night. Hold that thing out. Enjoy. It was. That's to me the ultimate story of orchestra, of opera conducting.
Yeah, because a lot of people forget that Strauss was a very important conductor, opera conductor, and also he was for a few years the music director of the Berlin Philharmonic, no less. And he premiered some important, for instance, Sibelius violin concerto was conducted by him. When
Sure.
it was premiered. He also conducted in Weimar the premiere of Hansel and Gretel. That was Richard Strauss. So it's interesting. What we've got something. Wish there were more of those conductors
Today,
for as well. Yeah. Today, there's just
for sure.
very, very few of those, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if that's the way conductors are trained, because all of these people grew up under the piano, basically. Either they were coaches, or their parents were singers or something. I mean, they really grew up with that sound and that sense of breath in their bodies already. And so when they went to opera conducting, it was not a difficult transition. The one that nobody ever talks about anymore, who was in Vienna for 100 years, was a guy named Klobuchar.
Oh, yeah.
And if you say his name to any singer, it's just like, oh, he was the God of all gods, who was just probably as good as any of the other people we've talked about, but just simply not ambitious. And he was also, if he was in the pit, you just think, okay, well, I'll chime in when I feel like it, but basically he's singing for you, it was amazing.
And the way he had to, I was lucky. I think may have been my very first visit to Japan, because he used to go there and he was much appreciated and valued in Japan. And I think I played Mendelssohn concerto with Klobuchar conducting. I'm pretty sure. Could have been 1985 or something like that.
That would about that side.
Right.
Yeah.
Lovely man, very, very beautiful. It's a real Kapellmeister. But
yes.
The other one that I played a great deal, I loved him as an orchestral conductor, but I think he was even better in opera, was Horst Stein.
Yeah. He was a very, very Straussian technique, very, handcuffed, but incredibly helpful. Really not known really as an opera conductor over symphony, but he could.
Had a good tenor voice, because when
I didn't know that.
I heard him actually singing for somebody who was saving it, or I said, I'll sing it. And he had. He was a personality. Oh boy, he was very strong, but fantastic collaborator. He was wonderful. I did so many different concerti with him. He was just, and
but he could be tough.
Oh, and he was very sort of, in his way, very cynical in the right way. I remember once we were doing something what we're doing now, interview, And he said, yeah, okay. So now that we've done that verbal striptease, let's move on and have lunch or whatever. And in some ways, and you have to agree with him because there is an element of that, he didn't mince words. He did not
Yeah,
mince
well, I
words.
prefer to think of it as a verbal tennis match
Yeah,
rather than a
tennis match,
verbal.
yes, it could be. But say, well, yeah, because there's some people who don't want to talk about those things and open up. So
Yeah.
now that we've done that verbal striptease, let's go and have lunch. So it was after the rehearsal. Somebody came just to interview, not online in those days. We're talking about
Yeah.
Basel early 80s when we lived in Wiesbaden. I could just get in a car and 3 hours later I was in Basel.
Yeah. Well, you could still do that if you hadn't moved.
I know. Yeah,
I can hear Susan laughing all the way from the other room now.
I know. Speaking of Strauss, I don't know whether I ever told you, I once spent 3 hours talking to Peter Strauss, his grandson.
Grandson, yeah.
In Garmisch, and I asked him, I said, Peter, isn't that amazing when you watch your grandfather conducting? He's just doesn't move at all, doesn't express any. But what's interesting, he reaches for his pocket watch, he looks at it, and then he starts conducting visibly faster. So what was it? He said, he didn't want to be late for a card game. I said,
Scotch game. Yeah.
I said, why cards? He said, well, and this is very, very rare information. He said, he suffered all his waking hours. He could not stop the music going through his head. It drove him crazy all the time. The only time it stopped when he started playing cards. So for him, that was the only relaxation he could have from music. So when he saw, card game, forget. And in the meantime, Zarathustra or whatever, just let's get it over with.
Move it along.
Yeah. For him, normally conductors just get so, like Bernstein.
Take a bath in it. Yeah. Truly.
Exactly. Or Penderecki. I performed with a number of, and he was just Mr. Cool, and let's get it over with.
Yeah.
Don't get too excited. My card game is waiting for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
now let's move to something else. Apart from Wagner and obviously Strauss, because you've done quite a lot of Janacek, didn't you?
Yeah. And yet I felt like I really never did it until the last 4 or 5 years of my career, because although I did it earlier, we always did it in German. Complete Janacek cycle in Cologne, but all in German.
It was all
that was just used to be how things were done. I mean, there were decent translations, but of course it's a translation and it's not probably what we had a wonderful Janacek cycle in Cologne, also Kupfer, very intense. That's actually where I met him. Helga Dernisch and I were doing our first Katja with him, and Helga was quite she was a personality in her own right, and she was talking about the entrance of the Kabanisha, and she said, I really feel like she should have a prayer book in her hands. And Harry looked at her and said, no, I don't think so. And that was the end of it. Just like, okay, that was the pissing contest over. Harry won. So that was just, there's the rules. No. So, and it was after, but he, he was totally convincing as a director in every respect. So we all, adored him. But that was I'm not sure, that cycle started in about 1985. And even a house which was a major German house at that time, which Cologne really was still doing the Janacek stuff in German, which seems kind of shocking to us today. But on the other hand, I've done, other productions now in Czech, and it's, oh my God, that's a hard language. Even to get approximately right, It's a real dilemma because, you know, you feel like you want to do it and in the way that it was written, and yet it's so hard to get right in the way that it was written. You know, you see the 5 consonants and it's a word, and you say, okay, so how do I sing that? So I do understand why people, even now in Germany, are actually going back to doing it in German sometimes. So, but long story short, answer, I didn't really come up against the Czech form of Janacek until much later, which was the Frankfurt production of Jenova, which was pretty epic. Great cast. Tilman Knabe was the director. I think I'm pretty sure Sebastian Weigler was already as the KMD then. Very, very gripping cast, and that was the first time I'd ever done anything in Czech, and it was just like, oh wow, this makes everything so much harder. But yeah, it's interesting. We took a tour of actually Katja to, I think it was Prague and Brno and everything like that. And me being, you know, the music historian person that I am, I said, I'm going to go to Janacek's house. And I couldn't find it. It was like I kept asking people where it was. And they said, well, you have to make an appointment because nobody's there. And this was like going to Bonn and having somebody say, Beethoven House? No, we don't have one of those. It's just like so strange. He's really not that well known in his own country. Not as nearly as often performed as he is in Germany.
Yeah.
I'm sure this is changing, but
yeah, they seem they seem to have gotten stuck on Dvorak and Smetana, and that's it. And it's always Dvorak or Smetana. And Janacek in many countries is in England played all the time and staged and one of the major composers. And what you said, of course, in his case, I would certainly support the idea because he worked even in his violin sonata, which I played and recorded, and I love it. And you know, he wrote music like a speech. You know, so his music is based on speech patterns. So I would imagine doing his opera in his native Czech. That probably just feels right. On the other hand, if I think of Shostakovich, who actually went on record and said on number of occasions that he felt that operas should be done in the language of where it is. In other words, like ENO, English National, they do it in English because people could actually understand it. And I'll tell you, I heard Julia doing, my daughter Julia Sitkovetsky, who sang Queen of the Night in English, with a score. You get the humor of it. Yes, it's not what Mozart wrote, but it appeals and people laugh when they're supposed to laugh and they know what's going on. There is something about that as well. So it's hard to say, if you are a listener, I mean, do you always follow the surtitles? If you don't know the story, or even if you do know the story, can you follow the ring and really understand what's going on there? If you actually respond to the language as it's being sung.
Well, I go back and forth around that with arguments as well, because of course, with certain orchestrations, including Wagner and also Janacek, you're not going to understand most of the people on stage anyway.
That's unfortunate.
So why don't we just do it, even if everybody's Czech is not absolutely perfect? Let's just do it and throw up those supertitles. I mean, even now in Germany, if they're doing Electra, they put the text on the supertitles because that orchestra, you don't understand anybody.
Yeah, believe
it's
me.
A completely, you have to project so much sound, and who the hell's going to worry about text, So I think, Janacek, we'll get our very best go of trying to duplicate as much of a Czech sound as we can and let people read it, It's a little unfortunate because, of course, all you see, are the nostrils of the guest.
Exactly.
Which is kind of a problem.
it does help now that I've been going, we've lived in London all these years, and of course in the Royal Opera House, they have quite, important subtitles, because a lot of operas now, I really do know this story, and I kind of understand what's going on in the ring after all these
Oh,
years.
good for you. You should do a whole broadcast on that.
The whole
Explain it to
broadcast on
us.
ring
Yeah.
and get people completely confused. Yeah. Anyway, but let's move on to today's situation. What was it like for you the last year? You probably couldn't really travel much anywhere, and
Well,
a fresh
actually,
lockdown.
until
Yeah.
this third wave, I was traveling pretty much wherever I wanted to, because I actually had COVID at the very
Yeah.
beginning. Yeah, not a bad case of it. I mean, maybe quite. I was in bed for 3 or 4 days, and it took me a while to get over it, but it wasn't. I mean, I thought I had a flu. I didn't know I had it.
It felt like
So that was that whole thing was. I felt like I was looking at the situation from a completely different angle as most people, because I was just, I wasn't worried about anything, about getting sick again. I was traveling very frequently, had my very own railway car to myself,
yes.
and it wasn't until they started to close the schools that I was teaching at that anything got fairly seriously, which happened, about halfway through the whole pandemic. So I don't feel like life changed for me that much. Listening to most of your broadcasts, and I think I mentioned this to Susan too, what I found so fascinating about it was the difference between what the men were saying and what the women were saying.
Yeah.
Because the men were had their noses pressed up against the glass, going, "When can we do what we do again? I'm so frustrated." And the women were going, "Oh, let's talk about our relationship. let's talk about our spiritual work. We can do yoga." It's such a difference in basic, what they call menline vibeline stuff, in how people react to these kind of things that you get closed into doing. And if you enclose a guy, he's gonna want out. And a lot of the women are saying, well, okay, we're stuck, so what can we do on inner work? I found that so fascinating. And I mean, let's just face it, at this point in the game, everybody's sick of doing everything else. If it's inner work or yoga or meditation or, interviews or whatever, we're just all really tired of it. And I have to say, hats off to England, because you guys are paving the way. You're giving the rest of us all hope that there might be a life afterwards. What pertains to the theater scene in Germany, there's two schools of thought over here. The one is that once those doors open up again, you're not going to be able to get a ticket, because people are just going to go running into the theater. They're so hungry for live entertainment. And the other, unfortunately, is that they've got used to streaming.
Yeah.
And have become a little more content not to go out in the evening, and why should I get dressed up, and that sort of thing. And I find it really hard to say which way, it's going to jump.
Yeah.
I know that people can't wait to go back to restaurants and get out.
Yeah.
So I hope very much that is going to pertain to theater life as well. And everybody that I know has plans for the second that the doors open, to do small productions. They're all set to go. So we just have to wait and see how the public is going to react. I mean, I can certainly imagine a certain amount of older people thinking, we can watch it at home too. And unfortunately, those are the stable of our audience in Wiesbaden anyway. So I just hope that things go well.
Not only in Wiesbaden, I think anywhere. I just talked to a major festival director who's presenting, risking to have his festival in the summer. I said, well, I'm sure all your artists will be safe. And everything. He said, I'm not so worried about artists. They're so eager they'll do
Yes,
anything.
can't wait. Yeah.
I'm much more concerned about the audience
Yes.
that will
Yes.
simply be too afraid and already used to for a year to be not to be going out, except maybe
Yeah.
for a few
Yeah.
restaurants, and that's a serious consideration,
It is.
because it's the fear, it's being. But I think, if people go on planes, sit, and I've gone to a number of planes because I've taken a few trips, and you sit next to, you hope that person either been vaccinated or took the test, otherwise he wouldn't be on, or this and that. But basically, you're breathing the same air, and if it's a long flight, boy, oh boy, it's the
Yeah.
same air. Mask,
Yeah.
no mask, this and that. So how is that less dangerous than sitting in the theater a, a good seat away from somebody, when it's regulated and all that? So it's a lot of it is psychological. A lot of it is psychological. It's the way you see it, and whether you feel that you really are, that we all are social animals, and there are certain moments in life we need to experience together.
Hmm. Yeah.
There is something like your wonderful husband Heiner, who's played in the Wiesbaden Orchestra all his life, and now, of course, he has another profession, another hobby, which became a profession. He deals in fantastic, early
Rare
art.
books and music.
Exactly. But he knows what I'm talking about. No matter how you know much we've taken it for granted, but to make music together, there's energy, there is exchange of emotions without a word being spoken, that
Hmm.
cannot be substituted. And for in order to, another conductor that I just talked this morning will be one of my future subjects, and he said we just had 250 people at our concert. We were so thrilled.
Yeah.
Normally we would get 1,000 and we'd say, "Oh, it's not full." Now
Yeah. Yeah. For
50,
sure. Yes.
hallelujah! It's great. So
Hallelujah.
maybe it's changed us. It's changed us in a good way. I always try to think that, because I'm a kind of glass half full person. What have you, if anything, have you learned from this long period of inactivity, relative inactivity? I mean, activity online and this, but not being with people. Have you missed it? What have you learned about yourself, your own, apart from being sick and getting over it and all that?
Yeah, that was relatively uninteresting. Well, I think I can pretty summarize it really well simply because of an article I read this morning in one of our local papers. Well, not, it's a national paper, but it's about creativity in general. And it's, I found it so fascinating. I went running into the living room and said, look, this is, we got to tell everybody about this. Um, because it says that not only the musicians and the artistic, the humanities feed out of this general pool of art, but also all of the creations that happen in the world of science or finance or anything also feed off of this pool. There's a genetic, there's a collective energy and need to communicate, even if it's not on a conscious level, with these energies that are around us in our society. And it's like, if you take music out of the schools, you are not going to get better mathematicians, you're going to get worse mathematicians.
Exactly.
And if you take art out of the school, you're not going to get more business people, you're going to get worse business people, because this is a common pot of creativity. And I say, that's what's wrong with all of us right now. That's why we're tired. That's why we're cranky. That's why we're frustrated. It's because we're not tapping into this, what they call the collective creativity of an entire people. If it's a nation or if it's a city, even if it's only a block, or in a theater or in a concert hall, we're not tapping into an energy source anymore. We need batteries. We're not hooked up with a battery anymore. And it's just such a wonderful article. And I'm preparing to use it as a thing to go to talk to people about taking music out of the schools, because look, this is science. This isn't like me saying music is good for all of us. This is science. And
Yes.
this also applies to our situation in Corona. The longer you keep us away from other people, the less creative we are. It's just how it works, And it's not because our creativity is going away, it's because we're not charged anymore.
Yeah. And we're not exchanging the energy. Part of this whole thing
Yeah.
is the synergy that happens between two people, five people, 10, and so forth.
Yeah.
It's that that's why, I can't wait to have as much, even in this pandemic. I mean, some of those things that I've been doing, the distant recordings and everything. I mean, people feel when I send the music, when I send my record, and then they add to it, and everybody works from their homes, but then we have this collective thing, and it sounds like we are together in the same room. We're on different continents, completely.
Yeah.
But it does work. It makes everybody just being, in the same energy group. But to be in the same room, phew, that's an incredible army already.
Yeah.
That's
Already.
that is something I cannot wait to see them all. Even one is at the rehearsal, but the other thing, just at the table, just talking and exchanging ideas and everything. I mean, you can sit on all these meetings, on Zoom, and you can hear, but everybody's just getting tired, and
Of course.
it's
No.
like in a classroom, when the teacher's speaking, you're already making notes about something else or whatever. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard. It's
Yeah.
harder to concentrate. It's just
Yeah.
not.
And the longer it goes on, the worse it gets, because we are not hooked in anymore. We're not feeding off of this energy anymore. And that, thank God, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel now.
Yeah, I
And
think.
I am a glass half full too kind of person. And I think that when people have the opportunity to go into the theater again, they're going to be, killing each other for tickets, because they just can't wait to. And they might not even be sure why it makes them feel better, but it does. It
It
does. You go out feeling better, no matter if it was a very sad opera. Doesn't matter, or a piece you didn't even like that much. It's still, I got something to talk about. I felt something. Something's going on. I'm with other people. I'm hooked into this thing, this large battery
Yeah,
that we all seem to have in common.
it's also so fantastic. I mean, in this pandemic, I must have been affected in the way of maybe getting more sentimental. But when I hear a beautiful piece of music, it just brings tears to my eyes. Just
Oh,
just
I know.
to be experiencing a great piece by Bach or by Mozart or Mendelssohn. It just moves me. Just to be witnessing such genius, such
Yeah.
pure genius, and it's just so something that we need daily.
Maybe that's a good thing too, that we don't take these things for granted anymore.
No.
That you go in and say, oh, look at those people, they're sitting next to each other and playing. Oh my God, it's just,
Yeah.
I went to, because they were rehearsing for an online streaming project, just two pianos, four singers, Brahms Liebeslieder Walzer. Cried through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Cried through the whole
Yeah.
thing.
The whole thing.
It was so beautiful. So listen to that. Listen to what they're doing with it. Oh my God. Oh, she's singing so well. Listen to that. It was ridiculous. It was, because I hadn't heard anything live for a year.
Just streaming. Or when I
Yeah.
first, after 6 months, I was in Prague, listening to the last round. I was judging. I was among the jury, and when the orchestra came out, and then the choir came out and sang just the first pieces before the goosebumps.
Yeah.
And it's just like
Goosebumps. Yeah.
unbelievable. The live orchestra with all its
Yeah.
glory and that beautiful hall. My God, it's a good thing we had masks. We had to wear,
Yeah.
because just just
Yeah.
start to cry.
Sobbing.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
loving.
Yeah.
It's just and it's not just the age. I think it's for young people. It must be even more devastating than for us. And for them, I think it's very, very important to keep focused on
Keep the
what.
faith.
Yeah,
Keep the faith.
because this
Yeah.
will pass. This will pass. And
It
as
will.
and as my last guest last week, Gonzalo said, everybody's just, oh, it's so terrible. this century. Last century was pretty horrendous. Look, 2 world wars, nuclear
And a
bomb,
flu that took 50 million
and
people,
so
by the
many.
way. Yeah.
Nobody, we've never had a century with more people killed by their
Yes.
own, tyrants like Stalin
Idiocy. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Hitler and Holocaust and everything. And we all think, oh God, all those good old days. Wait a minute.
Nah,
Wait
not
a
so much.
Not
Yeah.
so much. It's not as bad as this. So
No.
on that optimistic note, I really
Yes.
thank you, Nadine. Thanks so much for taking the time. And I wish we could visit again soon in
We
East
will. We
Europe.
will.
And of course, London, we've been, visiting each other in the previous life, but I'm sure.
In previous life, yes, really. True.
So
I'm looking forward to it.
yeah,
Keep my
this is
bed warm for me.
absolutely. And thanks so much. And in the meantime,
Okay.
thank you everybody for listening. And of course, you know that you need to, if you haven't yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, and I'll meet you in a week. Thank you, Nadine, so much. Stay
Mwah.
safe. Thank you.